how I became aware of gender. One was when my father in college told me that my father was a really nice man, but he had traditional ideas about women and gender. And he said, if your brother goes to graduate school, we're going to try hard to pay for it. If you go to graduate school, it was much cheaper then, by the way, not like now. If you go to graduate school, we wouldn't do that. And I was like, why? Because I had been getting messages about, do you think about what you want to do, et cetera. So that was a wake-up call. And then when I went to graduate school, the women's movement started, and it was very exciting. It was so exciting. And there was even a brief period where a couple of college presidents called themselves feminists, and I went to graduate school at Northwestern. We started a women's studies program. What started out as women's studies, and now for us is gender, sexuality, and women's studies, is a very dynamic field. It's always changing. And in the beginning, different academic departments and disciplines were like, well, I don't know, this is kind of, outsider stuff. And now, I mean, it's so exciting that in many fields, what's the big deal? I mean, you do gender. It's so embedded in social life in so many ways. But initially it wasn't that way. When you add women to your account, you not only get an accurate historical record or sociological record or psychological record, but you start changing the field. So, as time passed, it was like, okay, we're doing women's studies, but really we're doing gender because it's a whole system, including men and women. And in fact, when I took my job as sociologist here at Penn, really nice guy, but he said, well, it's nice you got this job, but this is all a fad, and you better think about other jobs because you won't be here very long. There are a lot of pressing issues for women at Penn today. Of course, there's faculty, staff, and students. For faculty and staff, the issues of combining work and family are ever present. For students, sexual violence, we know, is a big issue. Also, body issues, the pressures for women students to perform at this very high level academically, and also to be, to dress and look a certain way, to have a certain kind of body is it's too much pressure, and it's hopefully the activism of Penn undergraduates is really wonderful on both of these topics, and hopefully more and more undergraduates realize that they get to make their own choices, not by some artificial standard set by other people. I try to convey to students sometimes that if an issue comes up in a class that I'm teaching about gender, that to just get to the point where women have the rights on campus that we have was a struggle. It was not that people on high said, gee whiz, we should have some better policies here. It was a movement, and people took risks and in terms of how they were perceived for speaking out, and I'm very grateful to them. That getting the Women's Center into its current location at Locust Walk and 37th was a big deal. That the Women's Center used to be housed in sort of smaller places wherever the decision makers decided there was a little space to stick it, and a huge turning point in the history of the Women's Center was when Robin Morgan, the famous second wave feminist came to Penn to speak in Hall of Flags. And she built up her tempo, and all of a sudden she said, and the Penn Women's Center should be on Locust Walk, and everybody cheered. And strangely, it's part of recapturing the past. That was kind of radical at the time. And lo and behold, now, thank goodness, it's like, of course, that's where it should be.